Yeah, it should be another draft physics video presentation. So I figured I'd do another comment by MindlessMarbles on the superhuman dance junk video, where he's claiming you can't speculate on causes to any of the physical effects in the universe if your cause, if your theory has some element of unfalsifiability. That is, we can't videotape it and prove it. So he would, MindlessMarbles apparently would agree that people like Sean Carroll shouldn't be allowed to write books about theories of multiverses because it's an unfalsifiable theory. No physicist should be able to speculate on dark matter because it's unfalsifiable. Entanglement, unfalsifiable. All of them are unfalsifiable. So physicists shouldn't really be allowed to make any of those videos or make any of the commentary. But in space, shouldn't be allowed to even speculate about it because it's unfalsifiable. So he's making a comment on a video that's basically making that argument, so you would tend to think he's agreeing with that kind of bullshit rhetoric. So the other thing that makes him quite irritating is he emailed me a little while ago asking me to unblock him because he had some new brilliant information. Never provided it. Never made a comment on any of my videos. Hasn't responded to any of the question videos or the experiment videos. Nothing. Absolutely nothing from this asshole. So yes, I'll just block him again. Fuck it. But he types this tripe. And it's tripe. So I just figured it was worthy of a conversation. Now, obviously, this whole general relativity thing depends on basically thought experiments. And Einstein did some of these thought experiments. And as I've pointed out, Einstein basically agrees with me, okay? And not with what physicists have done to his theory. But the idea would be is that Einstein did envision what would be called a light clock, and that it would send photons across a spaceship. And if you move this spaceship very fast, it would appear, that the light would would fall, okay, would bend. It wouldn't really. The spaceship would just move forward and the photon would hit the wall. But the point is, as you're making the photon, frankly, the photon would be broken by the speed because the photon is made out of quanta or elements, and the elements would end up not hitting the surface in any one place. They'd keep hitting the surface over a very large area, and it would never be received as a photon anyway. So if you really think about these thought experiments, they're kind of garbage. And this was all in the purpose of Einstein making some statement he shouldn't even have bothered with, which is some kind of notion that all motion is the same, in the universe, and that, frankly, the physics is the same in any object moving as it is in an object not. It's called the equivalency principle, but it's just kind of stupid because you shouldn't make these equivalencies because each circumstance is different. And you could understand that if this spaceship was moving half the speed of light, that all of the things it crashed into coming towards it, another way of telling how fast you're going is to see how many holes are blown in your roof, because that would be the physical consequence. Your matter would be traveling so fast. I mean, it's so much faster than a speeding bullet. Can't even tell you how much faster than a speeding bullet, okay, going half the speed of light would be, that every little particle of dust would have insane momentum. So, yes, it doesn't matter whether you're moving into it or it's moving into you. It doesn't matter whether I move into a standing bullet at 10,000 miles an hour or whether the bullet moves 10,000 miles an hour towards me. The point is a small bullet will impact my large surface, and the fact is it'll just drive a hole through it. Either way. And that's true. But the rest of this nonsense isn't. So the fact is that if I was to go half the speed of light, my light clock wouldn't work. The photons would get all broken. The polarization of the photons would become humongous, and therefore none of the light could ever be received as a photon. But second, as I'm in the ship, it's just going to have a million holes blown in it by every little kind of tiny bit of matter sitting in the universe. And not to mention the fact that a bunch of radiation coming at me as soft X-rays would end up now being hard X-rays. Okay, and likewise for gamma radiation, the radiation level going forward would be much more intense, and I would be, probably burned to a cinder and all that crap. So none of these thought experiments are very useful. So anyway, general relativity is just this notion that there's something called a space-time, and that somehow time is related to two things. One thing that Einstein speculated about was gravity or acceleration, and that somehow affects space-time. And the other is velocity, that just having velocity, yeah, you can see enough of that, would also warp your perception of time. And again, perception is irrelevant. The real truth is things actually move in the universe. And I would argue that it's kind of intuitively, you could just say, well, why the two separations? Why create a notion that somehow gravity is affecting time, in terms of breaking clocks? And this is really just about breaking clocks. Gravity breaks clocks the same way velocity breaks clocks. When you could sort of understand that gravity really is velocity. I mean, that's what accelerations do, is create a kind of velocity. And I made the simple argument that you can sort of understand it in a simple way, that why gravity becomes velocity. Okay, so how do I make gravity become a velocity? Well, if I have an object and it's moving this way, or even if it's not, okay, if I have an object here and I apply a force on it, but there's some other force acting, like if it's free falling, well then, okay, it's only got the velocity of the additive per second influence of the gravity. But clearly that can add up to a lot of speed over any period of time. You will acquire quite a lot of velocity in free fall. But in space, they find out that when you put a satellite in free fall, okay, that is, you put it around an Earth, it's technically free falling. It's falling towards Earth, but it never gains any velocity through the process because it doesn't add, because it keeps going this way. And so its velocity is just countering another direction. And when you add the two directions up, it never goes any faster. It's just stuck going one speed. And so even though it's free falling, it gains no momentum, no extra momentum from the falling process. And so you could argue that it's not gaining velocity. And then when something's on the Earth, when it's being stopped from free falling, like you are, you're not allowed to free fall because there's a force pushing you up. So you have a force pushing you down and a force pushing you up, and you appear to be stationary. Well, now any idiot can understand that because you appear to be stationary doesn't mean that pieces of you aren't going up and that pieces of you aren't going down. So I could just make this as a thermodynamic argument. If I had a balloon, okay, and I put atoms in it and they had pressure, so they're going to be pushing on the outside of the balloon. But at any moment in time, right, and then the external pressure is going to be pushing on the outside of the balloon. At any moment of time, one piece of the balloon could be going this way. And then the next moment of time, that piece of the balloon will be going this way, and that way, and this way, based on what particle of the pressure, what little bit. So this is perfectly consistent with their own, quantum field theory, where they realize that there's a field of certain density of pressure, and that these two fields can be on two opposite sides of a medium. They would understand that, yes, at any one place, the field is influencing it this way, and at this place it's influencing it that way, and at this place it's this way, and stuff is constantly moving. So another point related to Einstein, because Einstein actually discovered the atom, the existence of atoms was sort of proven by Einstein recognizing that a limitation for microscopes is the fact that the little bits themselves, little bits of atom, are actually changing their positions constantly. They're constantly moving. And that's why we can't see things with a microscope, is because everything moves too much. When you try to get really, really close, it's all moving. And this is a problem. Because it's all blurs into nothing. So, there's this recognition that atoms aren't just standing in one place. They're not just sitting right here and that's all they're doing. They're actually doing a lot of thising. And then if I just move a balloon, let's say I had a balloon full of gas and I moved it this way, and you could understand that the atoms here were moving in and moving out and moving in and moving out. Well, as I start to move it this way, you can see that all that in and out means this. That in and out is a direction, is actually a motion. And that you can just understand that it's really a line, a straight line. And if you did straighten that line, you'd figure out it was a very long distance. So if I straighten this wavy line into a straight line, I'll find out it's a very long line. And even though, so it only looks like I traveled from here to here, but because I did it in this eccentric manner, it means I really traveled, 10 miles instead of 10 feet, because I was moving a lot while I was traveling. And so you can just sort of understand that the real motion of an object is what are the atoms doing. And gravity is affecting the atoms. It's not affecting the outside of a person. It's not affecting their head and their shoulders and their arms. It's shooting right through you and hitting your atoms. It's hitting a lot of you before it's absorbed. And so the little bits are doing all of this motion. And so this great deal of distance means that in the same time, this 10 feet, it looks like you moved. Well, that 10 feet, and this is just a moment of time, and if you really stretch it all out, you really traveled 10 miles in that time, and that means your velocity was, 50,000 miles an hour. So even though we look like we're just sitting here on the earth, spinning around every day, at whatever, 22 miles an hour or something like that, we're really moving quite fast because we're doing this as we're sitting here. Some of my atoms are moving up at this moment, some are moving down. And this, like I said, this isn't a debatable fact. We already know Einstein proved this. The atoms are moving. And that's a real fact. It's happening right now. They're doing a lot of distance changing, change in positions in real space, in the real absolute space. They are actually moving a lot of places and doing a lot of stuff in every little tiny second. They travel a lot of places. So their velocity is much higher than what it might appear to be to us, because we're not seeing all of the motion. So that's the simple argument. So the obvious argument, see, one of the curiosities of general relativity is people have this perception that the satellite in space is the one that needs to be adjusted because it's being time dilated, because it's moving 20,000 miles an hour. But the actual truth of general relativity is that no, us in the gravity, us here on Earth, we're in a heavier gravity, so you can understand that the more energy I have, the more heat, the more motion the atoms have. And the same thing's true with gravity. The more gravity I have and the more force pushing me back then. And so I'm essentially in more heat. So I'm jiggling even more. So the fact is that here on Earth, we're jiggling a lot more than the satellite. The satellite's not even really jiggling because there is nothing stopping it from falling. And the only thing it's doing is turning. It's turning. It's making a turn. Okay? And it ends up being this. The turn is a compromise. There's a force this way and a force down, and the two forces add up to a compromise. And the compromise keeps turning the object around the Earth. But it's not really doing this. Depending on how hot it is, of course. But that's the real point. The point is that the weak gravity, even if there was an aleasing, it would be a very wide aleasing. The strong gravity means you bounce a lot more. It's like being hotter, so you bounce more. And so therefore we're traveling the longer distance. Therefore we're traveling the higher speed in real terms. Our little nuclear bits travel more distance in the same amount of time than this orbiting satellite. And it's our clock that's moving too slow. So that's the facts. And it's a fact most people get wrong because they think the fast satellite is the thing that's getting time dilated when it's really no. It's the person just standing here who's being time dilated. His clock is the one that's slow. And again, the slowness of the clock just has to do with they're all atomic clocks. The only clock that has enough precision in terms of how many little that has enough little marks on the ruler are atomic clocks. And so really we're just saying, how does gravity, or how does motion, velocity, how does traveling distance in a certain amount of time affect a decaying atom? And the truth is that it slows down the decay. Now I argue that it probably does that because as it gains velocity, it's moving into more force. Therefore, it's getting hit by more stuff in one direction than the other direction. And decay only happens when events create a perfect intersection inside of an atom, and that's what causes it to break, is that two bits of force have to hit exactly at the same time, and they can't do that as reliably when they're in an uneven field. So if they're in a field where they're moving through a field, that means they're getting hit by more energy in one direction than the other direction, and it means it's less likely to have that coincidental event when it's moving. And so that's why the decay rate is slowed down. So there can be a simple mechanical explanation. So, and this has nothing to do with a formula beyond the fact that you're recognizing there are some variables that will affect the outcome, and one of them is obviously velocity. So velocity would be the key ingredient to affecting something called decay of an isotope, breaking of a clock. Right. And then there's a separate field theory that Einstein generated for the precession of Mercury. Now that theory is basically recognizing that the sun has a center of gravity, and that the sun's center of gravity is in fact moving. And that motion in the sun's center of gravity is what's causing the precession change in Mercury, where Mercury's a little bit out of alignment, wobbling. All the planets are wobbling, but the other ones are so much further away, there's no effect from the fact that the sun's center of gravity is moving. But the sun's center of gravity affects Mercury because it's so close. And that's all that field theory is recognizing. But the field theory is different than general relativity. And so I'm saying all this because it's the context of his comment that I'm going to read, that I'm going to dispute. So, nothing, that outrageous that I'm stating, blah, 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 blah. So he says, GR offers a specific formula that can be tested against reality. Well, the point is, the formula isn't tested very often because nobody even likes to mess with Einstein's formulas because they're full of terms, and lots of terms mean you have to do 3 days work to figure out what the term actually is, and so they don't use it. Now, GPS people have admitted they don't use Einstein's formula, they just use an approximation. Clearly NASA has admitted they don't use general relativity, they just use Newton's math. It's good enough. So this is just, you got to take it with a grain of salt, this hype. Gary, don't the particles, so he's saying I said this, so he puts it in quotes. It's not a quote. The particles just bounce the right way. So obviously I don't say they just bounce. They always have to be hit by a force. And when there's two competing forces, they don't just meet at the same time and say, I push you this way and I push you this way at exactly the same moment. So nothing moves ever because the force is applied perfectly evenly. Every millisecond of time, there's a perfectly even amount of force. Two light bulbs shining hit me at exactly the same way. Every millisecond, I'm getting hit by exactly the same number of photons from each light source. Only an idiot would believe that's true. So, and don't need any formula. I have the truth. So that's a lie. I never said anything like that. Formalizing things is a good idea. I don't got anything against it. I don't have satellite data, and I really don't love mathematics to pieces. So yeah, I'm not going to waste my time deriving formulas for you. I'm saying there's a correlation between velocity and effects on atomic decay, and I say that's all you need to know. The fact that decay happens more aggressively, you can change the decay rate of an atom merely by putting an association with other atoms, that is, exposing it to more energy, kind of indicates that decay isn't some magical thing that's happening by a clock cycle, that it's an environmental condition. Things decay based on the environment they're in. You put them in a different environment, they decay slower. So it's environmentally sensitive decay rate, and velocity changes your environment. It exposes you to different amounts of energy from different directions. Okay, except I don't. Anyway, claim I have the truth. So I don't even know. These, like I said, they have to resort to not even accurate quotes. And you're saying, what kind of lame ass puts quotes around things that aren't quotes? I mean, that's just lying about what somebody said, isn't it? Oh yeah, that's what it is. It's just lying. General relativity actually makes specific quantitative predictions. Well, that's just not true either. Nobody, when they talk about more precise measurement, they're not saying more precise correlation to Einstein. They're just saying we were measuring the effect more precisely. Not that it's more precisely matching Einstein's number. So he's confusing these things. Predictions where the results can be compared to the theory. And again, these comparisons are rarely made. You won't find too many pages where they actually do Einstein's math to figure out what the right answer would be and then say, look how close it is to Einstein's number. You won't find that shit. Scientists are at the stage where they are making precision tests, so he puts that in capital letters, of the theory. No, they're making precise measurements of things can be explained with a lot of different theories. Velocity explains it, as I just pointed out. The fact that there's redshift, that light redshifts in gravity, isn't necessarily you don't need general relativity to understand what might be happening. Again, it's just an argument about every time light is created, it's created by matter. Matter creates light. Okay, so there's an object that is in fact moving, Brownian motioning. The atoms are moving, and as they're moving one way, they're being stimulated another way, which produces the photons. So the photons can be produced differently based on what this matter is doing. So if the matter is in a strong gravitational field, you can understand that the matter is in fact vibrating, and that you could have some phenomenon where the light being produced, okay, would be shifted in its frequency based on that movement. Not an insane bit of speculation. Okay, of the theory, so we're at the stage where they're asking, at this point, will this theory break down? So it's another quote. I don't know who he's quoting there. I think it's broken down from its very start. The very idea that something called time is affected by gravity and affected by velocity, is missing the real ball. And the only thing that's affecting anything is velocity. And velocity can be understood as heat. 2 examples. So these are just examples. So the Galileo satellite, so again, he's arguing as if other people are saying nothing breaks clocks. Well, of course, different things can break clocks. And so the argument is you're saying general relativity is breaking the clock. I'm saying, no, velocity is breaking it. And that cause you don't need any notion of believing in a bent space-time. All you have to have is a notion of force. So if you believe a force is acting on it, the force is essentially heating it, moving it. The movement is distance, velocity, and that changes the metabolism of the atoms, and therefore what they're going to produce and when they're going to produce it. Guess what Gary's idiotic explanation for gravitational time dilation is? As I'm arguing, gravitational time dilation doesn't exist, in the sense that, yes, gravity causes movement, and movement causes the breaking of clocks. He says, and I'm not kidding, I can give you a link if requested. Yeah, and again, so he says it's mockable. It's a mockable theory to suggest that because we are on the surface of the planet Earth, and the ground is literally pushing us up, it is literally doing that, and the gravity is literally pushing us down, it's literally doing that, that somehow we wouldn't, that somehow the two forces would meet each other exactly right, and every single force bit would hit every single other bit at exactly the same time, and nothing would move. So his argument that is, if I put a bunch of hot air in a balloon, that the pressure from the outside and the pressure from the inside in the balloon, the speed, matches perfectly when they hit on the surface of the balloon, and the surface of the balloon doesn't move at all. That's his theory. Yeah, stupid. Yeah, it's almost mockable, right? Where I could say, yeah, and he actually thinks this. He's so fucking dumb. Yeah. Anyway. I'm not kidding. I can give a link if requested. Yes, good. Fine. Yeah, I think it's a perfectly rational theory to anybody who's got a reasonable mind. Well, the particles of the Earth, so he puts quotes again, and this is just a lie. Well, the particles of the Earth just happen. I never say it just happens, so that's a lie. You know, to bounce up and down more when they are under a stronger gravitational field. So that's just a lie. I'm clearly stating, obviously gravity's causing the Earth to be incredibly high pressure. You don't have to go very deep underwater to recognize how much pressure there is, because it'll pop your eardrums. Tremendous pressure as you go inside the Earth. The Earth is this. If I go down into here, the pressure gets intense. If I wanted to make a well to the center of the Earth, I would have to have 400 feet of concrete, on either side of the well to keep the well from collapsing. And that wouldn't even do me any good, because I'd really have to have, there would be no solution. There would be such intense pressure pushing in, and the pressure pushing in is essentially just the diversion of the pressure pushing out, right? So, there's incredible pressure. So there's pressure pushing. You can feel it. You can feel it on your feet. You can feel it on your ass when you're sitting down. You're being pushed, and you're being pushed this way. So he's arguing to me that it's unreasonable to think that this pressure never is applied perfectly evenly. You don't get hit by a little gravity bit at exactly the same time you get hit by a little force bit from here, and the two of them hit each other exactly the same time. No, what's happening to each bit is it's getting pushed up, and it's getting pushed down, and it's getting pushed, and the average is it moves this way. But that's just the average. The truth is that it's always doing this. And that's called Brownian motion, by the way. That's part of the reason why there is Brownian motion. All right. So he lies. He puts quotes around crap that's just crap. I never said that. About more than they are under the stronger gravitational field. So it's not more. They're pushed down just as much as they're pushed up. The two forces are in equilibrium, but there is a lot of motion. And that slows the clock down. Well, obviously I'm saying the velocity. The extra distance means an extra. You can't say, look, here's the distance from here to here, right? There's 2 lines of distance from here to here. Now, obviously, if I do this, and I have a certain amount of time, I say it got here in 1 second. Well, then I know that this is the distance you travel in 1 second, and that's your velocity. But obviously, if I know the thing's doing this, I know this line now is really long, many 50 times maybe what this other line was. It could be just a lot more. And obviously, so my velocity, if my velocity was v1, now it's v1 times 50. I mean, it's a much higher velocity I'm traveling if I'm taking this longer path. Not hard to understand. So he just mocks that. So it's not possible that could be the truth. So he just knows automatically it's not possible that this is about velocity. He's discounted it entirely, merely because it's not in a form that, that's not what Einstein said. So what? It explains the phenomenon. All right. So what a putz. What a fucking piece of work. This is exactly the kind of unfalsifiable trash. So he doesn't think bent space as a cause is unfalsifiable trash. He doesn't think multiverses as a cause is an unfalsifiable trash. So dark matter, it's not unfalsifiable trash. But anybody else who suggests something is unfalsifiable trash, even though it's exactly as falsifiable. The two theories are no different in terms of their falsifiability, and they're only falsifiable because we can only see the effects. We'll never see the causes. We can only see how they affect the universe and measure the effects and try to deduce the causes. So we're all stuck with the same problem. It will always be invisible. Photons will always be invisible. Unless you come up with some other magical particle to see them with, they will always remain invisible. All scientists have that limitation. But he just wants to mock the ones he wants to, the word he wishes to call, the one he honestly calls unfalsifiable. See, this is how dishonest he is. Sean Carroll admits multiverses is an unfalsifiable theory. He still argues there's good reason to believe it. And he believes it. And he believes it for good reason. And you're saying he's not allowed to say that. He's not allowed to say it's still a good theory. God is a bad theory. It's not a bad theory because it's unfalsifiable. It's a bad theory because it's ludicrously stupid. Okay, makes the entire channel unscientific. So this is, and you're saying I should have some respect for your commentary, some respect for your interaction in the past or now, when you'll say something this bullshit, and you can't see that you're just a petty weasel. You're just a little butt-hurt, petty psychopath, essentially, just lying. Yeah, okay. He gives a nice sounding story. So one minute you say the story is so ridiculous you can laugh at it, and the next minute you say it sounds like it could be true. Yeah, which is it, asshole? And then offers no reasoning. Well, obviously I did offer the reasoning. Derivation, so this is important to him, right? He has to have a mathematical formula or he can't understand anything. So he can't understand this, like wind, water. Okay, water in a stream. And I drop something in the stream and it moves with the water. So unless I give him a mathematical theory, he can't understand, it's momentum. The water has mass, the water's moving, the motion is going to interact, with the surface of the object, and it's going to push its mass. He needs a formula, or he can't understand. All right, mathematics. So again, he thinks the universe is mathematics. He actually thinks there isn't like a proton and an electron. There's just 1 and 2. Yeah, no. The universe is made out of physical objects in spatial locations, asshole. It's not made out of mathematics. Anyway, to demonstrate that his basic rules of his theory give the specific time dilation formula that we observe. The point is I'm arguing that it's a dodge to think this is about gravity, because the only component of gravity that's significant is acceleration. And the key point is acceleration only means something when we measure it over time. If I do this to something, right, and I make it so the frame rate is slow enough, and you never see this arc, you just see it as in one place. You just see it at this frame rate, and so you never see it doing the other stuff. And I have it, at just the right frame rate, just the right phase, so all you do is see this. You'll say the object isn't moving, when actually it is moving. You see? It's really easy to be deceived into thinking acceleration without velocity means something. Well, what it means is that you have to be accelerating in both directions. If you're not gaining velocity from the acceleration, then it seems clear that the acceleration is reversing. And so you are constantly accelerating. You're just accelerating in two opposite directions, so it doesn't look like you went anywhere, when actually you went a lot of places. You drew a lot of lines, okay? That's not a concept that's hard to understand. Okay. So anyway, perfectly consistent as an explanation of what we've observed. So again, the key ingredient is velocity breaks clocks. There's no evidence that clock breaking means there's a time dimension. Why do we observe the specific formula given by Einstein's theory? So again, he says that's what we observe. You won't see a paper that points out, here, we predicted the satellite's time dilation before we put it into space with Einstein's formula. It's not that specific. The answer won't be good enough. They have to turn the dials, to get the right answer. Einstein's theory and not the infinitely many other possible time dilation formulas, whatever those would be. But the point is if you ask the GPS guys, all the ones I've seen, they'll point out they're not using Einstein's math. Why this formula has and not some other formula. So again, it's not a formula, it's a concept. General relativity is understood as a concept, that there's this relationship between motion caused by gravity or motion caused by velocity, two separate things for no good reason, in my opinion, and the fact that clocks don't tick the same rate. But that's it. It's not that time changed. Again, you haven't broken through any barrier, the barrier you have. You're making a claim that time changed. You have to kind of prove that the clock didn't change. And clearly the whole experiment is about making changes to the environment of the clock. So why don't you just say the clock changes? Time necessary. Why is it still telling right time? You affect the clock. I hit the clock with a hammer, and I change the time on the clock, and you're saying that means I changed time. You haven't met your burden of proof connecting those dots. All there's evidence of is that, yeah, you can hit a clock with a hammer and the time will change. Okay, his theory doesn't explain it because he could have given the exact same answer no matter what the precision test told us. So again, yeah, I'm not really interested in getting the decimal points, all the way down to a 0.00001 about how much deflection there is if I orbit a little eccentrically around the Earth. Okay, there's a little tiny difference in the amount of gravity you're in, and that's a tiny difference in your time dilation. I don't really care. I'm saying, yes, there is a precision to it. The universe is a very precise clock, the whole universe, and everything is accountable, and you can account for everything. But I personally really not interested in making it my life's work. Sorry. Not interested. With Einstein's theory, it's not like that. It either passes the precision test. So again, he said the formula passes a precision test. I have never seen the formula tested for its precision. All you can do is get more precise data on the fact of the phenomenon existing, and that's what the satellite's data is. The satellite data is just demonstrating that, yes, when the satellites, if this was the Earth and the satellite's further away from the Earth and then it goes closer to the Earth, that when it's closer, there's more time dilation. The clock runs a little slower, and when it's further away, it runs a little faster. Okay? Now, that isn't in dispute. Okay? So why would I spend my life's work trying to prove that's wrong when I'm not disputing that? Okay, how fans can possibly fail to understand that is beyond me. Yeah, well, how you can, you're such a despicable liar, a despicable human being. I mean, I don't know how you look at yourself in the mirror every day. Don't you just see the petty weasel that you are? Can't you just admit you're jealous, you resent, you got all kinds of hang-ups? And that you really are dependent on some wooey perception of the universe. You really want the universe to be some kind of little wooey land, right? You want it to be a great adventure or something. You're not interested in the truth, right? You're interested in validating theories that wooify the universe. Isn't that your real game? Mindless marbles. Anyway, absolutely insane. Well, again, my opinion of you is likewise. You have no character, no credibility. You're just a terrible, fucking, stinking, lousy, lying sack of shit. You just can't be fair to any argument. You're terribly unfair. All right, so then he responds to super. I have 2 links, the timestamps within the links. Hopefully YouTube will let this comment and links through. So this paranoia about not being able to post links is just hilarious. I've never had that problem. But anyway, yeah, and there's 2 of my videos making, pieces of the argument where I'm just making this simple argument that, this distance is more than this distance, okay? Yeah. This distance is more than this distance. Yeah. Because of this. So this velocity is much higher than this velocity. Yeah. Ooh, what a crazy thing to say. More distance means higher velocity. That's insane. Yeah. So, what a fucking weasel. So yeah, let's go block him. Fucking jackass. Oh, unblock me. I have something important to say. Nothing. He pussied out because he realized he was full of shit. Simple answer. So yeah, fuck you. Despicable people. Alright, well, that's enough of that. I mean, general relativity is not my favorite subject. And just frankly, it's like I said, you people want to believe in a time dimension. I don't really care. It's not really the important physics. But I'm just saying it's silly. Time is just a function. You can't make more space. You can't make more distance. You can't... All this fucking bullshit about I can perceive it differently than you and therefore the facts change. It's just nonsense. When 2 things happen, right, a thing happens over here at the same time as it happens over here, that's just a fact. And it doesn't matter where I'm looking at it from. Where I'm looking at it from is totally relevant. So what? This guy sees this one first. So what? This guy sees this one first. Who cares? What's the truth? Oh, the truth is these 2 things happened at exactly the same time in time. And that's it. Nothing changed. And obviously it takes time for me to see, and it takes time for him to see, and that's just a fact of life. So what? It changes nothing about this. There's only one frame in the universe. We're all in the same fucking frame. You can't not frame yourself out of the universe. It doesn't happen. Your magical world of I'm going to time travel or I'm going to warp speed. None of it's ever going to happen. You're just deluded, wishy-washy hope abusers. Ugh. And propagandists and liars to boot.